11 o'clock. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you on this Thursday morning. Oh, the news of the ever-changing world of college football never seems to slow down. We are still just under 200 days away from this season getting started. Well, we'll get our first glimpse of the 12-team college football playoff. But after only deciding on Tuesday what that exact format was going to be for the next 2 years, leaders of the college football playoff are already discussing expanding even further in 2026, potentially with 14 teams and a whole lot more automatic qualifiers with that as well.
Yeah, fascinating. We were just talking off air about this, and maybe the ideal. Are we gonna play the game, Tyler?
I think we're going to play the game.
We'll make your case.
Have our own make your case segment for this as well.
Make your case, and that'll give us the opportunity. And if you got your own playoff,
yes, please give us your own formats if you have an idea.
Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100, or even give us a call. You can let Captain Dave know your ideal. He'll jot it down and pick the best one at the end. Isn't that right,
you know,
Dave?
we'll also get Captain Dave.
Like, no.
We'll get Captain Dave's format as well. I'm sure he's got a good sense of how we should decide this as well.
He's like, no, don't do that to me, guys. Yeah, but this is fascinating, and I'm particularly intrigued, in this new format about the automatic qualifiers, right? We saw, for the first time ever, Florida State get left out, and that was a huge point of contention, right? So this in theory, a way to avoid that. But also, I think you've got some, I don't know if you call them unintended consequences because you kind of know what the deal is, but you also have some situations where some really, really good teams that maybe you could say deserve to be in the top four. That's always an argument, right?
Sure.
It's always an argument of who should be in the top four. It was an argument this past year. It will be an argument no matter the format. But you have a situation where maybe one of the best four teams, subjective as that may be, doesn't get into that top four because of this format.
I mean, I'm actually for expansion, but I would love to see what a 12-team playoff actually looks like before we start talking about 14 and 16 teams and all this. I think there has to be a reason to do it if you're going to do it. I think expanding, first of all, going from BCS to 4, I think was the right move. I think going from 4 to 12 even is the right move because how can you really call it a playoff if you have teams that did not lose a single game not making it in? And Mike Leach, God rest his soul, he was like just laughing at the idea that you even called it a playoff in one of those old press conference clips. And he's got a point. It's not a playoff, regardless if we call it the college football playoff, if only 4 teams make it in. So you're actually making it a true playoff. I completely disagree with the idea that, the college football regular season matters. If you add a couple more teams, the regular season isn't going to matter. If anything, the regular season potentially could even mean more in that you have more teams down the stretch of the year who will be playing for a chance to be in the college football playoff. Yes, you kind of lose that aspect of, hey, only 2 teams are going to make it, so if you lose a game, you're done. But I think in terms of down the stretch, that will be replaced by, hey, these 3 games are going to determine who is going to make the college football playoff. I also love the fact that whether it's 12 or even 14, I don't know what 14 even looks like to really comment on it yet, but 12-team playoff allows what I think is going to be possibly one of the coolest things we've ever seen in college athletics, and that is on location, on campus college football playoff games.
Oh, yeah.
The absolute worst part of the postseason is that you play playoff games in these silly NFL stadiums and then charge thousands of dollars for people to go to it, and it ends up being corporate, tickets that are given away. It's not the same fans that would be. I mean, can y'all imagine if Williams-Brice Stadium was hosting an on-campus playoff game? Like, I mean,
Well,
I don't know if Columbia could survive, honestly. Like, it would be insane.
It's like a utopia.
And that's the interesting thing about the 12-team format and this proposed 14-team format, which would shrink the number of buys from 4 to 2, where only the top 2 seeds get the buys into what would then be, the quarterfinals. College football, as much as it's changing, is still steeped in tradition in a lot of ways, especially when we talk about bowls where they have to exist in some form, where we just kind of tie them in to the college football playoff now, where we're going to be playing, the Fiesta Bowl and the Cotton Bowl as quarterfinals, and then going and playing in the Sugar and Rose Bowl as semifinals before playing the national championship, where as things kind of move along here, in a perfect world, if you didn't have the bowls, you would have, home sites for all these playoff rounds until you get to the national championship game, which I feel like as we continue to expand here, eventually, I feel like we're eventually getting to 16. Like, I feel like that's the destination at the end of the day, and why you wouldn't go ahead to jump to that in 2026, I don't know, because 14 kind of seems like a weird stopgap in the middle of it. But that is something that I agree with you, Wes. I'm very interested to see with this 12-team format this year of what that's going to be like with having these host site games the weekend before Christmas, with the first round games for this year, and theoretically with the 14-team playoff coming in a couple seasons as well. But I do wonder for the teams that this year, 4 of them, and theoretically in 2 years, 2 of them that don't get the opportunity to host these games, getting the buys. Well, yes, you are benefiting from having the extra week off, but the revenue you're missing out on from hosting a playoff game in your own stadium, in your own city. I imagine there's a lot of schools that are going to be saying, hey, how do we get a part of this? Why are we missing out on this? Yes, the buy is great, but we'd love to be able to host a game in our own stadium as opposed to, like you said, going to the Fiesta Bowl or something like that for their first round game instead.
Yeah, hosting a game for college football playoff would be incredible, as I said. And I also, obviously you're going to get the sort of the push as far as revenues in your town, in your college town. Do we know how the ticket revenue is going to be handled? Is that going to be sort of split up among everybody? Is that going to be, hey, you hosted it, you get to keep all that money? Do we know the facts on that yet? I think that's an interesting sort of financial discussion in this as well. We know all this is ultimately about money, and probably even more so than what it's going to mean for your town. Ultimately, this is about the TV deal. And this, $7.8 billion extension that is on the way, according to The Athletic and ESPN. That's ultimately what this is about. And I think as we get closer and closer to the players being employees, or whether it's some almost made-up term that doesn't quite make them employees but lets them share in the revenue, however you want to structure that, college football, as much money as it's making, they've got to grow the pie, I feel like, so to speak, because the pie is going to be split up a few more ways than it once was. And I think right now the most proven way to do that is by your TV deal. And however this ends up working out, it all ultimately gets back to that.
Current contract that expires after 2025, and this is according to our guys at On 3, Eric Prisbell, 80% has been distributed to the Power 5, 20% to the Group of 5. That's the
college football playoff contract.
Football playoff contract. ESPN has paid the college football playoff an average, according to this, of $470 million annually, but that number has to increase, right? So what you're going to get now is, because of a variety of different factors, you got more dollars in play, right? So this new extension, 6-year extension, ESPN's going to be paying over $1 billion with a B dollars to broadcast the 11 games. You also have, at the same time, you got the SEC's expanding, right? You're bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. You got the Big Ten expanding to 18 schools. You kind of have lingering this tension where, we don't know for sure what's going to happen, but the Big Ten and the SEC could expand further. Not next year, aside from the ones I just mentioned. But what if in a year or two they expand and add other teams? What if the SEC added Virginia and North Carolina, right? And then the Big Ten added, what if they added a Clemson or an FSU, or like, what if they got it done to where Notre Dame in the next several years, if they got them, then you've got the tension of those two power conferences could always break away and do their own things, because this gap has widened between not just the biggest four conferences in the group of five, but those two have created more separation.
Well, that's what's interesting about the details we're learning about this proposal of a 14-team playoff with mainly automatic qualifiers. The Big Ten is pushing to have 4 AQ spots for their league. I imagine the SEC would be something similar, to where you're leaving, I don't know, maybe 2 spots for the ACC and the Big 12 respectively, because again, the SEC and the Big Ten wield most of the power, and you're going to have pretty much half of the Power 5 teams at that point in time. I don't know if the ACC and the Big 12 are going to agree to something like that. But as we've talked about, the SEC and the Big Ten looking out for their own interest here, are trying to get as many teams in the playoff as they possibly can, or it may end up being that they have at least half the teams in the field on a given year with this new potential playoff format in a couple of years.
I don't think I love the guaranteed automatic qualifiers except for championship winners.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's kind of where I draw the line. Maybe each conference gets 2 AQs, one for your sort of conference champion that wins your conference championship, and one for you have so many teams now, you almost could do a regular season champion as well, because your regular season champion doesn't automatically win your conference championship every year. So I could see maybe, I don't know, tying that in. I'm shooting off the hip here, but I think to start that 3, 4 AQs, no, at that point, if we're going to expand this thing out, whether it's 12, 14, 16, whatever it may be, let's reward the teams that take home trophies, but otherwise give me the best teams, period. I think we're getting it's getting too involved into the politics of the situation to say, wow, the top 4 from this conference, that's going to be different in different years. Some years SEC is going to be deep. Some years they're not. So just give me, by whatever metric we all decide on, give me the best 12, the best 14, the best 16, whatever it may be.
There's a lot of ways we can go with this. I think it's a perfect time to play a game of Make Your Case, which we'll do coming up next, for how we'd go about deciding the college football playoff format. Real quick, though, before we get into that, I want to remind you about Rivalry Friday, the ticket giveaway we're doing for the Gamecocks game against Clemson, coming up next Friday, March 1st, out at Founders Park. All you got to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Game TV, then go online to 1075thegame.com and fill out the form, hit submit for your chance to win tickets to see the Gamecocks and the Tigers again next Friday out at Founders Park. Make Your Case, College Football Playoff Edition, coming up next, right here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
All right, guys, got a great way for you to upgrade the man cave. How about a custom framing job from our friends at Goal Line Framing? That could be anything from diplomas, original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. Maybe you've got a signed print that you want to take to the next level to throw it on the wall. Give our friends at Goal Line Framing, that's owner Kendall Walsh, manager Joni James, 2 huge Gamecocks. They're going to take great care of you, so give them a call today, 803-739-1337. They're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can also give them a follow on Instagram at Goldline Framing SC. Again, diplomas, original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. They can help you with any and all of your custom framing needs. And in-store over at 511 12th Street, West Columbia, they've got an art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items all available for you right there. If you want to set something up, if you got questions, call them right now, 803-739-1337.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you. Before we get into a rousing edition of Make Your Case, our guy Josh is telling us we have a couple of pairs of tickets for baseball to give away for tomorrow afternoon's game, 4 o'clock out at Founders Park as they take on Belmont in game number 1 of the weekend series. Callers number 4 and 5 right now, 803-404-6100 will each win a pair of tickets to see the Gamecocks take on the Belmont Bruins coming up tomorrow at 4 o'clock out at Founders Park. Captain Dave waiting to take your phone calls there. Before he does take those phone calls, hit it, Dave. It's time for a rousing edition of Make Your Case, considering we're talking about the college football playoff. Make your case for your ideal playoff format. You can do whatever you want. If you want to go back to 2 teams, the BCS format, you can do that. If you want a 64-team men's basketball March Madness field, you can do that as well. It's your own individual playoff format. Chris We'll start with you.
Oh, boy. I'm worried that Wes and I are going to have the same thing, but I don't think so.
No, I'm trying to come up with some crazy ideas here.
Okay.
But
Mine is not crazy.
Okay.
my brain isn't that good anymore. I don't know.
The best, I heard it again on a podcast the other day. The best, like, work is stolen, you know?
Okay.
So let me tell you what I'm going to go with. I actually really like some form or fashion of what the FCS does.
Okay.
There's problems with anything.
Nothing's ever going to be perfect.
Nothing's going to be perfect, right? So the number one problem is, think of an SEC school, right? We're on the cusp of SEC schools playing 9 conference games.
Yep.
They're going to play 12 in total. And so if you had what the FCS has right now, which is a 24-team playoff, if you make it to the title game, I'm bad at math, that's 5 games, right? If you don't get a bye.
Yes.
Let's say you don't get a bye.
Yes.
It's 4 if you get a bye.
So they do 8 get a bye?
Yes.
So then you have 16 teams don't get a bye.
That's
Yes.
right.
When they play each other, you have 8 teams left, and then they play the other 8.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
So it's a lot of games added. That's a problem. And I don't think anytime soon that TV, ESPN, is going to be like, yeah, y'all take a game out. You know, y'all take a game out so we can fit this in.
And that's the interesting thing about the 14-team format is you're adding 2 more games to that first weekend by adding 2 more teams taking out 2 of the buys. So again, the ad revenue, the money from all that kind of stuff, just adds to the money they're making hand over fist anyway.
But here's what I like about it. The reason I like that, and maybe you pare it down a little bit and change it, but FCS has 10 automatic bids.
Yep.
And you could actually match that up with what FBS has in terms of number of conferences. We'll see what happens with Tupac. But you've got basically, if you count independents, you've got 11. Right now, Notre Dame cannot get an automatic qualifier.
Nope.
But let's say you combine the Pac-12 and independents, and you say that's basically a conference automatic qualifier. One of those.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You can't make it maybe you play them in a title game somehow.
So Pac-12 and Notre Dame they're vying for the same.
Well, not only Notre
AQ
Dame,
spot.
whoever else.
Well,
yes,
but in
BYU.
So if BYU goes undefeated.
Well, BYU's in the Big 12 now.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with.
It is.
Right. They were an independent
For now.
For now. Okay, but if you combine the Pac-12, the Tupac, whatever it is, and independent somehow, then you've got 10 conferences.
Yep.
So you could say 10 automatic qualifiers. It's the conference champion.
Okay.
Boom. Then you somehow get to your 8 buys, and then you go play a tournament.
Okay.
Are there problems? Yes.
Sure.
But do I like the idea?
All right.
Yes, I do.
Wes, how about you?
I was really trying. I was trying to give 5 conference champions a bye into round 2, but my math isn't necessarily mathing because then
I don't know how that would work.
you end up with it works. That would be I had 15 teams, and then but that gets you down to 5 games. But then you have to do a later bye in there to make that work. So it didn't really work out. But all right. Here's what we're doing. We're taking the committee, and we are throwing them away. No more committee.
Oh.
No more.
This is juicy.
The committee is not getting to choose anything anymore as far as my teams, right? So top 5 conference champions are automatic qualifiers.
Okay.
And then there's a 6th spot for an undefeated. There's an automatic qualifier 6th spot for an undefeated team if they are either not Power 5 or they're independent.
Okay.
So that somewhat puts Notre Dame in there, but it doesn't guarantee them anything. They have to be undefeated, no losses. Otherwise, you just get put into the at-large category.
Okay.
So
it could be like Memphis.
yeah, if you're undefeated,
Yeah.
you're getting that other. If there's somehow 2 additional undefeated spots, you get the next one, right?
Yep.
And so then we're sticking for now with the 5 and 7 as far as how or 5, potentially 6.
Okay.
If there's an undefeated team. But we're doing first 4 get buys, 12 overall teams, but we're bringing back the BCS formula
Okay.
in order to actually order the teams, and then we're gonna tell everybody exactly what factors are in the BCS formula to start the year. So there's not going to be, hey, Jimmy was at Florida State back in 71, and Johnny was at A&M back in 72, and he holds a grudge on the special teams coordinator at Baylor's grandson. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're taking all that out. We're going BCS. And then we're going to know the exact orders. So then you have the top 5 or 6 that are automatic qualifiers. They're getting in. The 4 who are getting the buys, they're being picked by where they are in the BCS order. And then the next spots, so 6 through 11, is going to be by the BCS.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
Got it.
12th team involved. We're going to take the top 25 overall, and if they're not already in, we're going to hold an online fan vote for the final spot to get in.
BCS
All
top
right.
25?
Okay.
Yes, with my BCS formula, top 25. Everything's based on the
I
computer.
love all this. Now, I do have one concern. What is in your BCS formula? The Wes Mitchell proprietary.
We haven't got there yet,
Is it like
Chris.
is it like the net rankings? Can you make it the opposite?
I mean, the BCS. What all was in the original BCS formula?
I know the AP poll wasn't in it in the past like 10 years. It's like the Harris poll, the coaches poll was factored in there. There was a lot of different polls that accounted for it.
And there's a lot of strength of schedule.
Yeah, a lot of metrics.
Yeah.
It was okay. The Harris, and then 6 computer rankings that are posted weekly, and then some other human. Yeah.
So
So there's computers.
But it's going to be computers. But yes, I would rather have the computers than the humans being able to tell me, oh, that team looked better than Florida State. So then I'm going to, after I've already chosen that I'm not putting Florida State in, I'm going to come up with a reason.
That's right.
I think we've learned with 14 playoff that the human element is not that much better than the random number, not random numbers, than the numbers that the computer spit out in the BCS formula. So
it's no better.
It's no better. I agree that, maybe going back to something like that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I'll keep mine simple here. I'm going to trim the number down from 12 to 8. I am not a fan of automatic qualifiers. I think we just take the top 8 teams. And if you are a conference champion in a Power 5 or Power 4 conference, you're probably going to be in that top 8 anyway. If you're a group of 5 team that deserves to play for the national championship, you need to be in the top 8. I'm keep it simple as that.
But do you have who's picking that top 8?
It's still going to be the committee, unfortunately.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
You know
So
what?
Johnny can have the grudge.
Maybe we can go split between committee and BCS. Maybe we can kind of incorporate that a little bit. I do like Wes's idea.
How are we going to do that?
Okay, I only have like 60 seconds here.
If we come up with a new BCS, all 3 of us, we could sell it to the college football playoff.
Maybe we could. We got to go out and get the copyright and the
sounds like
all that to that, because apparently Dave didn't get the copyrights to college football playoff when he invented it years ago on these very same airwaves. But that's a different story for a different day. So I'm for 8, top 8, no AQs, just the top 8 teams. Eliminates playing too many games at the end of the season. That's my format. Again, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg here. A lot to talk about with the future expansion of the college football playoff before we even get to 12 teams. So, again, just kind of a starting point here. Going to talk to Coach Elbaum from Gamecock Central coming up next about the women's basketball team in action tonight. Take on Alabama with the chance to wrap up the SEC regular season crown. That's up next here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on the Game.
All right, guys, it's lunchtime, 11:30 a.m. here on the game. You know the recommendation I'm about to throw out to you. Firehouse Subs. Shout out to our guy Larry Chandler, owner-operator of all 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. We're going to keep telling you about it. Make you go get it. The new Chicken Parmesan Meatball Sub is here for a limited time only. If you haven't had it yet, make sure you get it before it is gone. Savory chicken meatballs, bright marinara, shaved Parmesan, melted provolone, and crispy Italian seasoned breadcrumbs, all on a toasted garlic bread roll. If you haven't had it, go check it out. Use the Rapid Rescue. Order online at firehouseSubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. Either way, your sandwich can be hot and ready. You can grab it right off the rack at the closest Firehouse Subs near you. You can also earn yourself some rewards points while you're at it. Check it out for a limited time only. Chicken Parmesan Meatball Sub. Go get it today at firehouseSubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on your Thursday morning. Do have women's basketball in action tonight as the Gamecocks take on Alabama, 7 o'clock coming up at Colonial Life Arena as we bring in our guy, Chris Wellbaum from Gamecock Central to talk a little bit of women's hoops. Tonight's game is interesting from the standpoint of South Carolina being able to lock up the SEC regular season crown by beating Alabama, as they do have a 3-game lead in the conference standings as of right now. And for a team that has national championship aspirations, this may be an accomplishment that might fly under the radar. But when you talk about the fact that there was just such a huge turnover of talent going from the freshie class to a lot of the women that are stepping up into new starting roles this season, Chris, how big of a deal is that? I know Dawn Staley downplayed it when asked about it yesterday, but how big of an accomplishment would it be for this team to claim that SEC regular season title tonight?
It's a huge accomplishment. And as much as Dawn downplays it, she cares about it, and she wants the players to care about it. But just the staying power to potentially repeat after last season really sends a message about. There were a lot of doubters, which is hard to believe, but there were a lot of doubters coming into this season, and to repeat so emphatically really sends a message about the staying power of this program.
Hey, Chris, appreciate you doing this, man. The way you put it in your preview story, which everybody can read for free on GamecockCentral.com, is that tonight's opponent, Alabama, has emerged as one of the leaders of the middle pack of the SEC. What can you tell us about this Alabama team? And then also, I think to a certain extent with South Carolina, it's really not even about the opponent at this point. I think it's a little bit more just about South Carolina finding a way to just play a little bit cleaner basketball, play a little bit better in first halves at this point. What was Dawn Staley's message about that to you guys this week?
Well, just that. One of the reasons I think she downplayed the SEC is because they have not played up to their capabilities the last 2 games. And she doesn't want them to she wants them to feel good about winning the SEC, but not too good, because they've got a lot to fix right now. And Alabama, like you said, they're good. They have a very good offense. They have had a good offense for a few years now, but they take a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. They're very efficient. And they have a really elite lead guard in Sarah Ashley Barker, who can score a lot of points and do a lot of things. And South Carolina has struggled against that type of player this season. We saw it against Florida. We saw it against Auburn, where the opposing lead guard got hot, scored a lot, and made things uncomfortable.
Chris, I was very interested to get your take on some of the comments that Dawn Staley made about practice. And we know Dawn calls it like it is. If she feels like her team is not playing well, not practicing well, she'll say it, and she'll balance that with, projecting confidence. In her post players recently is one example. But her comments were basically that, they haven't been practicing well, and they've been trying to improve those practice habits the coaches have. And she feels like the team has been, to some degree mentally and physically exhausted. What do you make of those comments at this point in the season?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that South Carolina sacrifices its second bye week to play UConn. So everybody else over the last week had an off night, whereas South Carolina not only didn't have an off night, had a hugely emotional game against UConn. And it's pretty obvious watching them that they're tired. They've been playing a lot of basketball and a lot of high-level basketball. And other teams, you say other teams have played a lot of basketball too. Well, pretty much everybody else has had a letdown and lost a game they shouldn't have. And South Carolina has avoided that. After the last game, Dawn used the expression we've learned while still winning, and that's the difference in what South Carolina has done and what everybody else has done. Everybody's tired, everybody's exhausted at this point, everybody's banged up, and she just wants to see them do a better job of playing through that, maintaining their focus. I think that's the thing you see. We always hear that's the first thing that goes is your focus when you're tired, and I think that's what we're seeing, where the offense is a little sloppy. they're not necessarily getting the ball where they want it to. They're taking an early, easy shot, and that's what she wants to see change. Is just the overall execution and focus. If you go back, 2 years after the Final Four loss to Stanford, the mantra all season was, it's this close. It's millimeters between going to the championship game and going home. And that was how they defined their focus all season. And I think that's kind of what she's trying to instill in this team right now.
Again, talking to our guy Chris Walbaum from Gamecock Central, mentioning that fatigue and just kind of being worn down from the grind of the season. Look, losing one of these games at the end of the regular season would not be, detrimental to this team. They'd still be a number one seed and still have an opportunity to pursue a national championship. But, with the game against Alabama tonight, do have another matchup against Tennessee, who they played a really tough game against just a couple of nights ago. What's your level of concern of South Carolina maybe not being able to put together the closing couple of minutes like we've seen against Tennessee and seen against Georgia to lock up a victory where they might actually stumble in one of these next couple of games?
I don't think even if it was a bad loss, I don't think there's too much concern. Like I said, pretty much every team has had a 20-point loss in the last couple of weeks. It's kind of strange. Obviously, you don't want that to happen, but I don't think it's any cause for alarm. If anything, we always talk about it. It gets you refocused to lose a game. Do I think they need to? Not necessarily. But, yeah, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if they lost a game.
Chris, do you put any importance on the potential to go the entire year undefeated? Obviously, I think seasons are ultimately judged on championships, but that's the one thing you look at, just to put your name in the history books to say this team literally was never defeated. Does that matter to anybody in the building over there? Or if you knew that a loss, not that you ever hope for a loss by any means if you're Dawn Staley or anybody on staff, but if you knew that a loss would refocus the group, would that be a good thing? Or does it matter to them? I don't know if they would say it publicly, but does it matter to potentially be an undefeated team to go down in history as that?
I think they will deny it, and I think they absolutely, if it comes to it, they want to go undefeated. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they're necessarily worried about that right now. The SEC tournament, playing 3 games in 3 days, weird things can happen. 2 years ago they lost in that bizarre championship game to Kentucky. A loss like that wouldn't hurt, but if they reach the Final Four again undefeated, the pressure is going to be extraordinary, because to do it 2 years in a row, to potentially lose 2 years in a row, they're going to feel that pressure. So avoiding that pressure, not necessarily a bad thing, but do they want that chance? Absolutely. Whether they'll say it or not, they absolutely they really feel the sting of losing last year, all of them. Even I mentioned earlier in the season, one of the interesting things about the team is even the players who weren't here last year, Tahina Pau, Malaysia Fulwiley, Tessa Johnson, they feel the sting of the Iowa loss last year, and they absolutely want to make up for that.
Well, the next challenge on the table is Alabama coming up tonight at 7 o'clock, and excited to see what happens if they can indeed wrap up the SEC regular season crown coming up tonight. Appreciate it as always, Chris.
All right, thanks for having me.
Again, Chris Walbaum from Gamecock Central, leading into tonight's coverage of that game. Jeff Carolina calls with Lamont Paris from 6 until 7. Tip-off for the women's basketball game is at 7. Pregame coverage starting on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW at 6:30. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs next here on the game.
Hungry.
Did you end up getting pitas yesterday?
Hmm?
Did you end up getting pitas yesterday?
No,
Yesterday?
I didn't. I ate one of those factors.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you. A couple more minutes here before jumping into the halftime show with myself and Terry Ford. Reminder, coming up today from 3 until 6, live edition of the post-game show with Jay and Elijah out at Sound and Images on Bluff Road. They're coming up tomorrow from noon until 3. It is the halftime show. Myself and Terry Ford will be out at Griffin Pools and Spas. I want to go back to our conversation from earlier discussing the college football playoff potentially jumping to 14 teams in 2026 and beyond. In terms of our own individual formats of the college football playoff, Nameless Texter weighs in and says, take it to 32 teams and just turn all the bowl games into playoff games, which, you know, if you're going to go to 14, I think 16 is kind of the cap on this thing, but why not? Go to 24, go to 32, heck, go to 64, turn it into December and January madness as opposed to March madness. I guess at this point, there's really no stopping them if they can continue to generate money from this, right?
Well, you're going to end up having like 20 games or something per team once it all plays out like that. But yeah, I do wonder where's the cap on this, and ultimately, if they're already talking about 14 and we haven't even played a season of 12 yet, then maybe that's the right approach. Just go ahead and find whatever the cap is, and let's just go ahead and hit it so that we can all get used to what the actual format is going to be and just stick with something for a while.
Let me ask you one question, yes or no. Whether it be 12, 14, or 16, do we see a new crop of teams suddenly start winning national championships because the field's expanded?
No.
Chris?
Yeah, I'd say no.
I mean, we're including more, which is great to be able to say, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
Penn State has made the college football playoff 5 out of 7 years. Cool, but they didn't advance past the second round in any of those years. And Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Alabama still winning national championships at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think ultimately you're going to have, I mean, a blue blood is a blue blood. And we do see, quote unquote, blue bloods kind of fall off. A lot of times they find their way back. There's still a cyclical element to it. But will we see teams that had basically no shot of winning it step up and win it? I would say probably not. Now, the one maybe interesting factor in all this is that you have now an expanded playoff combined with NIL, combined with transfer portal. So sometimes when you start adding all these different elements into one thing and happening all at the same time, it can produce results that were unexpected. So I think we've already seen, if you look at like the top 25 prospects from the most recent recruiting class, and you start to say, oh, well, shoot, that guy's going to Missouri, that guy's going to South Carolina. It is a little bit more, the talent is a little bit more spread out, I would say, probably because of NIL elements being involved here. So maybe as that talent gets more and more spread out, combined with more opportunity to be in the college football playoff, maybe you see that happen, and you do see, I don't know, the 12th team go win a national title. Ultimately, a lot of times when it really comes down to it, the better team is going to win in football, and it would just be tough to go. Like, there may be one upset, but it's going to be tough for that team that's the 12th or the 16th team to go through the entire bracket, upsetting everybody because of how physical football is. And generally that wins out, whereas basketball, you can see a team go on a Cinderella run based on, one, they just get hot, hitting a bunch of three-pointers, and are just a veteran group that's maybe played together a lot.
But even then, like, what's the last team in college basketball that's won a title that would be like a Cinderella? That we've seen the Final Four run.
Yeah, I mean, really, has a Cinderella actually?
That's what I'm saying.
Actually won the national championship in basketball? I don't think they have.
I can't think of one. And so, to your point, Wes, it is tough. Now, there are more teams now that have an opportunity. There might be more upsets in the playoff because there's more opportunities for upsets, the parity that you spoke to, the portal. But, you know, and it could be that in, you know, sometime between now and the next 10 years, if we keep this same format, maybe one year some outlier team does win the title. Maybe one of those former Blue Bloods is restored to prominence and they go win a title. But I don't think there's going to be a deal. Even with, you can say there's more parity in college football, and that be true, and it is true. but you can also say at the end of the day, it's probably still going to be one of the same teams more often than not that's going to win the national title.
Well, regardless, whether you like it or not, to quote Bobby Dylan, the times, they are a-changing. And even before we get to a 12-team format, already looking in to more expansion in a couple of years. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, it's halftime show with myself, Terry Ford. We'll have more into this. Also hit some more baseball from last night as well. All coming up right here on The Game.
Before I hand over the mic, let me tell you about one more great sponsor, our friends at Classic Roofing, our newest supporter here on the show. Give them a call today, 803-590-7870, or head on over to classicroofingsc.com, where you can get more information on their services or set up a free estimate. Joe Reeder, Mac Sawyer, two friends of mine, they've got a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years in the roofing game, and they're going to take great care of you, just like they took great care of me. What you're going to do is you're going to call them, or like I said, go to that website,